biggest country on Earth spanning 11 time zones, is now facing a crisis so severe that even its own leaders can't keep it hidden. Russia, the same nation that once bragged about being an energy superpower, is being crippled by an unlikely enemy: the breakdown of its own fuel supply. Gas stations are backed up for hours. Airports are running low on jet fuel. Farmers can't afford to run their tractors. Cars sit idle while drivers curse at empty pumps. 4 of the country's largest oil refineries have shut down not for a few weeks, but indefinitely. Experts inside Russia admit they may never return to full production again. What once felt unshakable has suddenly started to crumble, and the shock waves are spreading everywhere. And this isn't just the result of bad management or outdated systems. The truth is far sharper. These breakdowns are being caused by direct strikes from Ukrainian drones and long-range missiles, a new type of warfare that turns Russia's massive size into a weakness instead of a strength. And here's the alarming part: the fuel crisis is spiraling far beyond the battlefield. Inside Russia, gasoline prices have jumped by 50% in only a matter of weeks, even as the Kremlin tries desperately to control the market. The government has banned gasoline exports entirely, leaving the state budget bleeding from lost sales. At gas stations across the country, scenes now look eerily similar to the chaos of the 1990s when the Soviet Union collapsed. But the problem goes deeper than empty pumps. In just 1 month, Ukraine managed to hit 7 major refineries across Russian territory. These weren't random strikes, they were precise, long-range attacks with new weapons that can travel nearly 3,000 kilometers. They weren't symbolic gestures. They were carefully planned and strategically devastating. The most important blow landed on the Ryazan oil refinery, one of Russia's largest and a vital supplier of fuel for Moscow and its surrounding regions. When Ryazan went down, the shortages didn't just hit remote areas, they hit the capital itself. And that is dangerous for the Kremlin. For Putin, shortages in Moscow and St. Petersburg are a far bigger threat than shortages in Siberia. These are the cities where elites live, where government officials work, and where protests can start. If gasoline prices spike in a faraway province, the Kremlin shrugs it off. But if people in Moscow can't drive to work and can't fuel their cars, or can't buy groceries delivered by truck, the risk of public unrest becomes real. This is why these strikes on refineries aren't just about infrastructure. They're political attacks aimed directly at Putin's survival. For decades, Russia has relied on oil exports as the backbone of its economy. Selling crude oil is profitable enough, but refining it into gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel multiplies the value. To maximize that revenue, Russia spent billions modernizing its refineries, replacing old Soviet-era equipment with advanced technology from Europe and the United States. And here's where the cracks appear. Nearly 80% of Russia's refinery equipment was imported from the West. Specialized turbines, valves, and digital control systems all came from EU and US companies. Now, under sanctions, Russia can't legally buy replacements. And fixing a refinery isn't like patching a roof. Each Ukrainian strike destroys custom-made high-tech machinery that Russia simply doesn't have the capacity to rebuild. The results are disastrous. When a refinery is knocked offline, it may never return to full strength. In a last-ditch effort, Russian engineers have begun cannibalizing their own facilities, stripping parts from one plant to repair another. But this is a losing game. For every refinery they bring partially back online, another is left permanently crippled. Piece by piece, the industrial backbone of Russia's energy empire is falling apart, and the fallout is hitting people directly. With fewer refineries producing gasoline, domestic supply is dropping fast. To prevent full-blown chaos, the government has banned all exports of gasoline and diesel, cutting off sales to foreign buyers. But this only creates a different crisis. Without those exports, Russia's budget loses billions every month. Meanwhile, at home, prices keep rising. In just 2 months, gasoline costs surged by 50%, a devastating blow to ordinary Russian families. Some try to argue that Russian fuel prices are now similar to what Americans pay at the pump. But this comparison is misleading. The average Russian earns only about 1/5 of the average American salary. So while higher gas prices might be an annoyance in the United States, in Russia they are life-changing. Families now have to choose between fueling their cars and buying basic necessities. This has trapped the Kremlin in a no-win cycle. If exports are allowed, domestic shortages spark unrest. If exports stay banned, the government bleeds revenue and the economy weakens further. Either way, the system is breaking down. For years, Russia's supporters claimed Ukraine could never win. They said Russia was simply too vast, too resource-rich, too powerful. But what's happening now proves how flawed that argument always was. Yes, Russia may be the largest country in the world by landmass, but size doesn't equal strength. Large parts of the country remain poor and underdeveloped, lacking even basic infrastructure like plumbing. A true superpower cannot exist when millions of its own people can't afford gasoline or heat their homes. The military is also suffering. Without fuel, the Russian Air Force struggles to keep jets in the air. Tanks, trucks, and armored vehicles all depend on diesel that is now harder to find. A fuel shortage isn't just an economic headache, it directly limits Russia's ability to wage war. For centuries, Russia's geography was its ultimate shield. Its industries were buried deep inside its vast territory, protected by distance. Napoleon learned this the hard way. Hitler did as well, but modern warfare has changed everything. Drones and long-range missiles mean distance no longer provides safety. Ukraine has shown it can strike refineries thousands of kilometers away. What once was Russia's greatest strength, its sheer size, is now a dangerous liability. This fuel crisis is more than an economic struggle. It's a glimpse into the fragility of the Russian state itself. For decades, Moscow projected an image of strength, of endless oil and gas wealth, of an empire too powerful to fail. But today, long lines at gas stations, surging prices, and fuel rationing tell a very different story. An empire cannot last if its own people lost faith in its ability to provide the basics. History has already shown us how this ends. Empires often look invincible until suddenly they collapse. The Soviet Union didn't die on the battlefield. It died under the weight of its economic failures and growing public anger. What's happening now feels hauntingly familiar. The same pattern is repeating. An authoritarian regime obsessed with military power ignores the suffering of its people. A war that was supposed to prove strength has instead revealed weakness. And this crisis doesn't stay contained inside Russia. With fuel exports halted, neighboring countries that depend on Russian supplies are left scrambling for alternatives. Energy markets around the globe feel the shockwaves. Prices bounce, economies adjust, and uncertainty grows. But maybe the most powerful impact isn't economic at all. It's psychological. The image of Russia as an untouchable energy giant has been shattered. Investors, allies, and even its rivals now see that Russia's energy empire is vulnerable and maybe even on the road to collapse. Each refinery knocked out isn't just a hit to gasoline production. It's a hit to Russia's economy, to its military readiness, and to its reputation as a global power. And with every strike, the pressure inside the country builds shortages as well as higher prices, which is going to create total chaos. This crisis was never just about gasoline, it's about the survival of a system built on the illusion of strength. And once that illusion fades, everyone will be doomed. Russia once laughed at the world, calling itself a giant gas station with nuclear weapons. But now even the gas station is running dry. Refineries are in ruins. Gasoline lines stretch endlessly. And the empire that claimed to be eternal is cracking in ways no propaganda can cover. Size does not equal strength. Landmass does not equal prosperity. And a nation that cannot fuel its people, or its army, cannot endure. The gasoline crisis tearing through Russia is more than a temporary shortage. It is a warning sign of decline, not collapse from the outside, but from within.